from Doctors for Responsible Gun Ownership. Dr. Robert Young is with us. Dr. Young, how are you, sir?
Cam, good afternoon. How are you?
I am fantastic. I appreciate you coming on the program. And I want to talk about your latest piece, Junk Science as Propaganda. You write, some weeks it's hard to decide which new anti-gun, quote-unquote, study to dismember. You said the problem is that there's so much propaganda coming so fast and furiously, no pun intended, like lobbing a lot of crude missiles at a target, hoping to do some damage, even though none of them are explosive. It's fascinating, Dr. Young, because we just saw this story last week, a major study looking at studies and how the vast majority of these studies that the study authors attempted to replicate, they couldn't. They could not replicate. Yeah. I think they looked at 100 different studies. They could only replicate the findings, I think, 39 out of the 100 studies that we see. And yet every day there are headlines, studies says, and you write, Dr. Young, particularly when it comes to gun laws, right? Studies say states with tougher gun laws have fewer mass shootings. Studies say people who don't own firearms are likely to live longer. Studies say people who own firearms have smaller genitalia. I mean, these are every day there's a study out there that is, it seems, designed to say don't own a gun.
Right. Well, and all those things are true if you pick your data well. That's the key to coming to the conclusions you like in studies you're doing. It's all about the data. It's just like a friend of mine in college long ago said, you don't have to be smart in taking your classes. It's all about which ones you pick.
Yeah, and so you talk about a couple of these recent pieces. Mm-hmm. An American Journal of Public Health article, and you say, note the clue, public health. State firearm legislation and non-fatal firearm injuries claims to show that Hawaii has a low number of gunshot injuries because it has strict gun laws. Mm-hmm. And you say that could be so if the authors could explain why they ignored 31 states in the comparison, ignored the rarer gun ownership of Hawaiians than average, and chose to look only at non-fatal gun injuries.
Well, it could be on that basis, yeah. I feel like I'm not contributing much, but you are reading the points I wanted to make for me. But I'm not sure it needs any explaining. You don't need a degree in statistics. You don't need a PhD in anything. If you just think about what these people are talking about, it's easy to start asking yourself the right questions about, well, what are they studying? Well, what are the factors involved? Well, what did they ignore? Well, what are some more likely possibilities here? And you start seeing this everywhere you look.
I was going to say, I mean, it really, being able to ask those right questions, to not just, look at the data and say, well, this is what the data says, because you're sure that is what the data says, but what variables, what inputs aren't there? For instance, you talk about a study, the firearms prevalence and homicides of law enforcement officers in the United States, right, by members of the Bloomberg and Harvard schools of public health axis. Among the many things that you say that questions that are raised here, and this is something I would never have even thought to look at. You say using the average of the 2001, 2002, and 2004 BRFSS data as the source of firearm ownership. And you asked, all right, well, what happened to the year 2003? And why did you use those particular years? Is it because using those particular years helps give you the data set that you're looking for?
Well, I'm suspicious of that. Now, I did not go and look up the 2003 set or the 2002-2005 set, but it's absurd to think that there is any rationality in not picking a sequential set of years, and generally the more the better. If you really want to look at long-term trends, a trend is not made by 2 years in a row. It's certainly not made by 1 year in a row. And that's all they've got there.
So one of the other things that we've been talking about here on the show, Dr. Young, I know that the last time we had you on, I think we were talking about the American Academy of Pediatrics. I think you mentioned the fact that they had come out and just said, look, if you're a parent, you shouldn't have guns in the home, right? That was their advice.
That's what they say. They'll backtrack then and start talking about how you should how they feel you should manage them, not being trained at all in gun safety themselves.
Sure.
But right, their ideal condition is no guns. We know that, and if they had their way and there were no guns in the homes, then there would be no civilian gun ownership.
And I thought this was interesting because NBC News had a story this week that the American Academy of Pediatrics is talking about the dangers of alcohol among youth, that drinking is a big risk factor for risky behaviors, for homicides, for suicides among adolescents. And they say that 79% of teenagers have had alcohol by the 12th grade. And so they are recommending, Dr. Young, not that parents remove alcohol from the house, but simply that they start talking to their kids about alcohol and drinking at the age of 9, I think they say. But nowhere do they say, listen, this is a real issue. Alcohol. I mean, in their study, they say alcohol is the substance most frequently used by children and adolescents in the United States, and its use in youth is associated with the leading causes of death and serious injury of this age, motor vehicle accidents, homicides, and suicides. But they don't say, so parents, the best thing that you could do would be to get rid of your alcohol. But if you're going to have alcohol in the house, keep it locked up, right? Keep a lock on the fridge. Make sure your kids can't get into the refrigerator where you've got your beer. They can't get into the bar where you have your spirits. Yes, talk to your kids. Before your kids go over to another house to play, talk to the parents, find out how they store their alcohol.
Sure.
None of that.
Oh, no, it's surprising, isn't it? I mean, surely you should keep your can and bottle openers locked up separately from your alcohol safe, I would think. There were 88,000 deaths due to all alcohol causes in the last year for which we have data. I think it's 2013. And as we all know, there were it's been running 30 to 32,000 by gunshot. Seems to me that alcohol is a much huger cause of morbidity and mortality in this country than guns, or as we would think about it, people misusing guns.
Is this simply a matter, Dr. Young, of maybe the study authors, and I don't know, I don't know this to be the case, but maybe the study authors like to have a drink or two every now and then, but they're not gun owners.
Well,
and most pediatricians are more likely to have a fire, or a bottle of alcohol in their house than a firearm, and so they're not going to tell themselves, well, get rid of the alcohol.
Well, given their philosophies, of course, that's likely. And alcohol, like the proper use of guns, it actually can be a healthy thing, used appropriately. 1 or 2 drinks for an adult in an evening, it actually has some health benefits. And so does a proper use of guns. So, yes, it's very curious. This report, it's not a study, this report in itself is good. It's saying the right things about an important problem, and early intervention is always desirable. But it's curious, is it not, that for gun problems, they recommend total abstinence, if not prohibition. For a substance use problem, they recommend education.
I absolutely, and you said it so succinctly, what I was trying to get at there for several minutes, that yes, here we have 2 inanimate objects. The American Academy of Pediatrics views both of them as troubling, both of them as something that are can be harmful to your kids. But again, the best way to deal with one is education. It's talking to your kids. The best way to deal with the other is, as you say, prohibition, eradication. Don't even have that inanimate object anywhere around you.
No, I think sometime between the ages of 9 and 13 are an ideal time to introduce your children to the safe handling and enjoyable use of firearms, too.
Well, listen, Dr. Young, I appreciate you coming on the program, and I hope we can talk again very soon.
Love to. Thanks, and you all take care and be good, Cam.
You too, sir. Appreciate it. Dr. Robert Young with Doctors for Responsible Gun Ownership joining us here on NRA News, Cam and Company.